Hey, what's happening, family? It's your man, Mark Black. I want to say peace, shalom, salam, namaste, and what's motherfucking cracking? Welcome to your Sucka-Free Saturday. You know how we do it, fam. I want to first give a shout out to everybody who's here right now. Shout out to Darker Vision, Sister Shar, Miss Denny, Spook is in the house, Noel, and for every one of you who show up, remember, make sure to hit the like or the hater button. Let YouTube know this is content you want to see, right? If you have social media, if you're active on Twitter or Facebook, we want to get eyeballs. So make sure you're sharing the content. And most importantly, if you're new or you haven't decided to sub for whatever reason, go ahead and stick around for a minute. You might like what you hear. Shout out to Midtown. Welcome to the broadcast. Let me make some adjustments here to the audio, fam, because I want to make sure that we boosting up loud and clear, right? I want y'all to be able to have no problems with hearing a brother, right? You know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna make a few adjustments here. Booyaka. I think that's gonna look just fine. Just fine. Midtown Pookie in the house. First of all, a little low. Thank you for the heads up. I'm gonna boost that up just a smidge. And we're gonna get it cracking. All righty. Let me know how that sounds now, fam. Hopefully the volume is sounding a little bit right. It looks like it's even headed towards a little peaking over here on my mixer, but that don't mean shit if it don't sound right to y'all. So let me know how things. There we go. Excellent. Thank you, Noel. I appreciate it. First of all, want to give a special shout out to Jamari Shalom, my latest sub. Also, I want to thank some people for some donations. Brother Cease, thank you for the tip, man. I appreciate it. Sister Denny, she said just a little something from a silent sufferer. Thank you. That one goes out to the video I did talk about invisible illnesses. That one's pretty important. If you haven't watched that, family, please make sure you do so, right? I want to give a shout out to my brother Thomas, who also gave a tip for for the support, and I appreciate that too as well. All right, family. So let's get into it. Let's do Sucker-Free Saturday the old school way with a relatively motherfucking controversial ass topic. As you all well know, I don't usually tend to reference the gender wars between black men and women. I don't usually tend to reference religion, and there's some specific reasons why. First of all, those topics are usually very controversial. It seems like no matter what the fuck you say, you're going to offend someone, right? So I don't usually tend to touch on those. But this past week, I've had some really, what I would consider really deep conversations around faith, religion, spirituality. And because I'm pretty much open and honest with all of you about everything that I'm on and what I be thinking, I wanted to touch on the topic of religion today, a change of pace. I bang on ADOS, ADOS, ADOS every day. And that's good. We need that, right? But with that being said, a little change of pace never hurt nobody, right? We could talk about other things besides ADOS. So I have a lot to say on various topics, whether it's politics, whether it's religion, whether it's the law, whether it's education, right? I study them all because they're all areas of human activity. So it's important to me to know how we as ADOS people are being affected across all the areas of human activity. So today, the title of this Sucka-Free Saturday broadcast is Defenders of the Faith. Now, as many of you know, I have held myself out to be an atheist. Now, I've been told that because I'm still open to the possibility of the existence of a deity or deities, that I'm not technically an atheist, that I'm an agnostic. And I, quite frankly, got tired of arguing. So I'll just say that I'm an agnostic, right? I have no belief whatsoever in anybody's deity, anybody's God figure, all right? But with that being said, today I'm going to do something that you would never expect an agnostic to do. I, your brother Mark Black, and one who loves you, is going to be a defender of the faith. That's right. I'm actually going to talk about today a couple of different things. The first thing I want to talk about is why we have religion, faith, spirituality in the first place. I'm not going to ask that you fucking agree with where I'm at, only that you understand. This is my analysis. This is what I've come to understand surrounds this. And I'm also going to tell a secret. By the way, before I do this, I want to give an extra special shout out to Sister Remy, known as Mupacalypso. It was a conversation I had with this sister about this that really drove this conversation that we're going to have today. So shout out to you, sister, and thank you for your for the opportunity to get some information and have some good give and take, some good discussion. But I'm also going to talk about the real power of faith, of religion, of spirituality. Peace, black man, what it do? You know how we do. This is Sucka-Free Saturday. Welcome to the broadcast. So, family, to get us started, I want to say to you, as an agnostic, aka atheist, that I have been convinced that if religion didn't exist, if spirituality didn't exist, who and what we are as human beings, we would have invented it. We would have came up with it. Absolutely 100% right down the line. If religion did not exist today, ultimately we would have came up with it. Because there are some definitive reasons why we would have came up with religion, with spirituality, with faith practices, and so on and so forth. All of these things that we express liturgically, religiously, spiritually, are functions of what and who we are as human beings. Now, where you and I might differ is I don't believe we were created with that innately in us. I don't believe that we were created. We're products of evolution, right? That's clear to me. But with that said, evolution as a process has been pretty effective at creating life forms that are good at solving problems. Let me explain. When you have a heat differential, meaning that you have one area that's cold and one area that's warm, as a species, it enhances your fitness. Peace, Dr. Lely and Double C's. Welcome to the broadcast. It enhances your fitness as a species to be able to differentiate between cold and hot. Why? Well, what if your prey animal, your food source, the source of your mating possibilities exist in the hot side of, say, the ocean? But you can't differentiate between hot and cold. Well, this means you miss food sources, you miss mating opportunities, and thus you lose your fitness as a species or as a member of that species. And thus you will die off without passing on your genetic contribution. So, over time, you develop the sense of being able to tell hot from cold, which increases your fitness, right? Which solves the problem of being able to determine hot from cold. Okay? When you have a light differential, like brightness and darkness, right? A member of a species that is able to perceive the differences between light and darkness finds itself in a position of being able to be more fit for its environment. Okay? So being able to have a basic sense of darkness over here, light over here, solves a problem. Being able to see clearly possible food sources, possible mating opportunities, and so on and so forth. Right? So if you think clearly about this, we as human beings are like every other species on this planet in that our brains, our sensory apparatus, right? Our eyes, noses, tongue, skin, right? Ears are all designed to gather data about our environment and using this brain computer process that data so that we can be more effective in the environment in which we find ourselves. Then you'll quickly understand how it is that spirituality and religion arose within human beings. Because as human beings, and again, I'm not asking you to agree or disagree. I'm explaining a position. Bring your evidence and we can have a discussion. This is me talking. Shout out to Zulu, by the way. Welcome to the broadcast. If you understand this problem-solving little fleshly brain computer you have sitting up in your skull, the biggest problem that human beings have had to solve in their environment isn't the environment. I know, sounds strange, right? Like, we got to make sure that we're cool when it's hot and hot when it's cool, that we get access to food sources and shelter. We got to make sure that we, maximize our mating opportunities with, with mating sex and all that other shit, right? And so on and so forth. You dig? Okay. Right? So, we have, at this point, prior to the creation of any type of faith practice, spirituality, or whatever, for the most part, have been well adapted for our environment. We have large buttocks and walk upright, which allows us to be able to run down our prey species like gazelles and stuff. We're not as fast as them, but we can last longer than they do. So we just run them down until they fatigue and tire, right? The more we study how humans are, how we operate, we can see how our ancestors manipulated their environment. They took tools and resources like stone and bone and wood, and because we don't have claws, shaped those stones and those bones and that wood into sharp objects, into sharp edge objects to be able to cut, slice, poke, stab things, right? We acquired very early on the use of fire to help break down and help us pre-digest food sources so that we're able to uptake the nutrition from those sources much more easier. We don't have multiple stomachs like herbivores got to digest grass and stuff like that, right? So early on in human development, we had already found ourselves fit for our environment. You did? So what was introduced in the earliest part of human existence that would create a problem that our brain computers would need to solve with spirituality, with religion, with faith practices? The problem of human interaction, of interaction between you and I. We actually have within our brain computer highly developed senses, or I should say highly developed analytical senses that allow us to be able to perceive states of other human beings. Did you know that you can tell 212 different emotional states just from the look of someone's eyes? You, as a human being, looking at another human being or another creature's eyes is not something that we're taught. It's something that we're born with innately. While human beings don't have as many instincts as other animals do, we do have instinctual and reactive behaviors. You feel me? So the problem that was introduced early on in human evolution was the problem of interacting with other human beings. We had to learn ways of being able to gather information for social interaction with other human beings. So over time, in our minds, right? In our minds, we have developed different skills and abilities and techniques. Black men is right. That's why people will say they see fear in your eyes. You can tell fear, joy, sadness, ennui, schadenfreude. There's so many different emotional states you can tell just by looking from someone's eyes. But that's not something that we're taught as children. That is something that we as human beings, as Homo sapiens sapiens, has as a part of our genetic heritage as a species. And it is designed to solve the problem of interaction with other human beings. I'll give you a case in point. A lot of what I'm going to talk about today stems from cognitive psychology, right? The study of the human mind and how we think. There's a term that is used in cognitive psychology called decoupled cognition. I'll repeat it. Decoupled cognition. What is decoupled cognition, you ask? Well, I will tell you. Decoupled cognition is the ability to be able to be focused on what's currently in front of you while still cogitating or thinking about interactions with other beings, other creatures, other time frames, other circumstances at the same time. Right? It is the ability to cogitate, to think, while also apprehending your current circumstances, right? So let's say that you out on a date with somebody, okay? Now, you like the person. You wanted to go out with them. You're having fun with them or whatever the case may be, right? So you're enjoying the date. But how many of you during the date were also thinking about the bill you got to pay on Monday, right? Thinking about the last date you went on, right? This doesn't make you a bad person. This actually makes you human. It's called decoupled cognition. It's a capability that we humans have so that we can both focus on what's right here in front of us while at the same time considering other things and other people. Can you imagine what interactions with other human beings would be like without decoupled cognition? Can you imagine having to actually be in the presence of your mother, your brother, your sisters, your cousins, your aunties, your nieces, your uncles, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, before you're actually able to think about them? Think about the problem that having the capability for decoupled cognition solves. Right? You're able to actually have conversations with humans that are not in front of you in your mind without them not even needing to be there. Now, where else do we find evidence of decoupled cognition? Just a closer walk with Jesus. Right? This concept of relationship with deity. Right? We can't see deity. Right? The Bible even says this: how can you love God whom no one has ever seen, but hate your brother who you see daily? Right? But we have that capability to have a relationship with a mind that is not in our presence. And that capability is a direct reflection of our evolution, our ability over time that we've gained as a species to be able to better interact with other human beings. Our willingness to interact and entertain cognition and thoughts of and relationships with minds, with presences that are not in front of us is one hell of an ability when you're having to maintain relationships across multiple ranges of territory and so on and so forth. Right? You're a part of this tribal band and you have interactions with this tribal band over here. You had damn well better be able to cogitate, to ponder upon, to think about what their motivations might be, what they're interested in or not interested in, what they're willing to trade and not willing to trade, how they feel about you or how they don't feel about you, and so on and so forth. Without decoupled cognition, we would not have that capability. We would literally need to be in sight of them before we could give them any thought process, any bandwidth in our heads. And decoupled cognition also is what gives us the capability to concept, the idea, the cogitation of having an interaction with a mind, because we know minds are tied to human beings that we can't perceive. A person's not in our presence, yet we can still have interaction with them. We can still think about their motivations, their desires, their wishes, fears, goals, so on and so forth. That ties directly into spirituality, into relationship with deity. There's another aspect of who we are as human beings that also works to help give rise to spirituality, to religion, to faith practices. And that's the idea of hyperactive agency detection. That's another cognitive psychology term. Hyperactive agency detection. Now, you know me, I speak black folk. So let me translate what this means into black people. What this means, family, is that when it comes to changes in our environment, we as human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens, have a tendency to assume an actor, right? So I'll give you another example of what I'm talking about. Let's say that you over in the high grass savanna of Africa, all right? And you're walking along and you see and hear a rustling in the grass. Now this grass is tall and thick, so you can't see through the grass. Now, you know, intellectually speaking, that there's a myriad of reasons why the grass might be rustling. It could be the wind. It could be some sort of little like meerkat or ground animal that just came up in that spot and rustled the grass. Could be a lion. Could be any goddamn thing, right? There's a whole host of reasons why that grass might be rustling. But with our hyperactive agency detection, we never assume that the grass is simply rustling just because it's rustling. We never assume that the grass just simply rustles. We assume that something is causing that grass to rustle, that something with purpose, with agency, is out there rustling the grass. Does that make sense, family? When you go, let's say you go camping, all right? And you got you a nice little rag top number, you know what I'm saying? Nice little rag top whip. And you go camping. And you wake up in the morning and you go out to your car. And you see the whole roof torn the fuck up. Look like somebody took a knife and just slashed that shit. You're going to be head up. You're going to be there with your camp knife or your strap if you have one, looking for some motherfuckers. Until you look inside and you see an empty cookie package that had cookies in it before. Then you might start to think, oh, well, maybe an animal broke into my car to get those cookies. You dig? Right? You see what I'm saying, family? Your first go-to in any circumstance that occurs, your first go-to is to assume that a mind with a purpose, with agency acted. Hyperactive agency detection. We have a tendency to assume that agency is involved in the things that happen around us. Now, why is this useful to us as human beings? What problem does hyperactive agency detection solve? Well, if you're interacting with other human beings, it eliminates the need to sit there and constantly ponder as to why things are happening. It prevents you being basically non-action taking, apathetic nobodies, do nothings, right? If you automatically have the assumption that humans are in the world and that humans act, thus, if something happens, it is likely caused by another mind, by an embodied mind, that saves you a lot of time and trouble in trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. By assuming that someone had agency and they chose to act to cause this effect or this change that you see in your environment, it reduces the need to devote bandwidth to trying to figure out what happened. Now, you could very well be wrong. It could have just been some ground subsidence, right? A sinkhole. Or it could have been the erosion, right, of some stone under the bedrock that caused the grass to rustle. Or it could have been any damn thing, right? And when you get a chance, you might sit there and ponder upon it. But at the time that it's happening, your assumption of agency protects you. Those who sat there and said, the grass is rustling, I wonder why, probably got et or jacked or otherwise wiped off the face of the planet. And they weren't likely to be the ones to pass on their genetic heritage, right? So it makes sense for us to assume agency in pretty much everything. Now, where else do we see the assumption of agency? We see the assumption of agency all throughout religion and spiritual practices and faith practices. We see it everywhere. As a faithful believer in the power of God, you believe that everything in this universe seen and unseen, is the product of agency. That it was created with a purpose. That is hyperactive agency detection at work. It is not a stretch at all whatsoever. If we have this innately a part of our evolutionary heritage, for us to make that extrapolation out to a deity or a series of deities, right? If we see that human beings can act with agency, how is it a stretch to assume that a copse of trees don't act with agency? That a murder of crows doesn't act with agency? Do you understand what I mean? Our first spiritual ideas and practices as human beings are what's commonly referred to today as animist. This was the assumption of consciousness in everything around us. The river was a being. This copse of trees was a being that had purpose and agency. This mountain was holy and sacred because it was the home of the great God so and so and so and so, right? When you read the Bible, Moses went up on a mountain to meet Yahweh, right? Our very first religious and spiritual understandings, people, came from the assumption that everything in our environment was a product of agency, because we are creatures of agency. With the innate sense, our spidey sense tells us there's got to be something behind this. And by something, we mean someone. Why do you think that one of the most expounded upon, one of the most broad topics of discussion on the internet and in real life involves conspiracy theories? Well, it's very simple, right? As hyperactive agency detectors, it makes sense for us to see a circumstance happen and assume that somebody had something to do with it. When we say someone, we're referring to a mind. And since we know minds are encapsulated in bodies, when we say somebody, we mean another human being, another person, or another thing with consciousness, with agency, with purpose. I'm telling you, family, none of this, what I'm saying, is in any way controversial. Because these ideas, these understandings help explain why, even if religion / spirituality / faith practices didn't exist, we would make them up. They would ultimately come to exist. I am arguing, as a defender of the faith, that your faith practice, your understanding and cognitions about deity and the ultimate destination of the universe and yourself and all of this is perfectly natural. It is perfectly natural. And it's all good. Bet you thought you'd never hear that from somebody who's an atheist, right? Somebody who's an agnostic. Family, because religion is an attempt to solve the problem of uncertainty, right? Because remember, everything we express as a species is an attempt to solve a problem, right? Our brain computer solves thousands of problems a second. The problem of keeping your heart beating, the problem of keeping your lungs, breathing, the problem of keeping your vision working, and so on and so forth. You are a problem-solving being. at your core with tools that help you to do that. And some great tools that have been recently introduced into our evolutionary heritage, such as decoupled cognition and hyperactive agency detection, that allows us to solve one of the greatest problems human beings still have today. And that's the problem of interacting with other human beings. But these same tools, these same technologies, if you will, can also be used to our detriment. Our minds could fool us. They often do. What's good, mate and Dave? Welcome to the broadcast. Our minds often trick us. Often. Don't believe me, just do the research. Just pick up any type of psychology or psychiatry journal, and you can learn all about how the human mind will constantly trick you. It'll make you see shit that ain't there, assume things that aren't true, right? It will confirm biases you already have innate. Even the idea that we have a free will is an illusion. Most people don't even understand that. This is all science, family. This is all the hard work of well-meaning people who spend years and decades of trying to figure this shit out. They have made this their life's work. And I think it deserves a much bigger look than what we give it. I was talking with the sister Remy, right? AKA Mupacalypso. And she was mentioning to me that she and her husband are looking to become members of the Nation of Islam. Okay. So we talked about it a bit. I asked her, run it down. Share your story with me. Right? She said to me that she was impressed with how the nation is able to take people that everyone else has consigned to the trash heap and turn them into amazing individuals, right? We remember the brother Al-Malik al-Shabazz, also known as Malcolm X, may he rest. A man who was a criminal, a thug, a hoodlum. That was the old school term for hood rat, a pimp, and so on and so forth. And this understanding, this faith practice took that man from that to being one of our best and brightest luminaries. And that fascinated her. That completely blew her away. She says, I don't know if all of their theology I can buy into. But there is a power there. And I want to know what it is. I want to know what it is. So we had a conversation. I'm not going to hype myself up. That's not my way. However, I am going to say that what I'm about to tell you is the biggest unspoken secret of every faith practice, every religion, every spiritual teaching you've ever heard. And what's worse is that every religion, every faith practice, every spiritual practice you've ever heard of, when it started, had this concept at its core. Every single one. Every single one. those religions, those faith practices, those spiritual systems that foster the growth of humans into mirrors to reflect the powers of God are the most effective, the most well-known, the most beloved spiritual and religious practices out there, bar none. Let me repeat that for y'all, just in case you might be sitting in the cheap seats. Every effective spiritual system, religious technology, whatever you want to call it, every effective one, for lack of a better way to say it, turns humans into deities. Yeah, I said it. That's the power that Sister Remy sees in the NOI. The power of theosis. Theosis is a Greek word which means union with God, right? From the Greek theos, which means God, and sis, from the Greek sin, which means the same. Theosis, literally translated, means the same. God and you share the same life. Now, why is this important? Why is this important? And Double C, that statement you said is more true than you ever could possibly know, except for the fact that there's really no need to reinvent the wheel. There are many spiritual systems out there, many what I call religious technologies out there that still retain the practices that lead to theosis, that still retain the power of transformation of human beings into gods. Don't believe me? Let's start off with Christianity. Somebody approached Yeshua, Jesus, and said to him, "Good teacher," and began to ask him something. And Yeshua paused him and said, "Wait, why do you call me good? There's no one good but God." Yeshua is also reputed to have said that, "Is it not written that we are all God's sons of the Most High God?" Right? Those are red letter words in the scriptures. Yeshua was also reported to have said, "Greater things than what I have done, you will do." And Yeshua was right. If you look back in early church history, I'm talking about from the initiation of the Christian church in the book of Acts forward, in its first few hundred years, Christianity had a power that allowed it to spread every motherfucking where it seemed like. One of the first converts was an African, an Ethiopian named Stephen, who went on to found the Coptic or the Ethiopian Orthodox Catholic Church, the oldest Christian church in existence, next to the Jerusalem church. There was a power inherent in the early church that is sorely not evident today, that is completely lacking. Pick a denomination. Pick a denomination. And short of emotional displays and the use of aesthetic to initiate emotional responses from people, there really is no power left in these churches. Why do you think so many hop from church to church to church to church to church, searching for just that thing? The Bible says, work out with fear and trembling your own salvation. Salvation is made available to you, but you got to put in the work. Yet you got Christians nowadays who say, oh, no, I'm saved by faith. I believe in Jesus Christ, so I can go and do whatever the fuck I want to do. You have none other than the Apostle Paul himself, who says everything is permitted, but not everything edifies. If your actions causes your brother to stumble, then you should refrain from those actions. Try telling that to the churches today and see what they got to say to you. The power inherent in the original Christian church was the same power expressed, if you believe, by Yeshua, which was the power of theosis, of union with God, not God's essence, but God's power. The power of omniscience, omnipotence, and omnibenevolence. Right? Those are the three powers that are overwhelmingly ascribed to God. Omniscience, all-knowing, right? Omnipotence, all-powerful. Omnipresence, right? All-present. And omnibenevolence, all good. You feel me? All good. You can't see God. So if there is going to be any evidence of those traits that are ascribed to God, where are we more likely to see the evidence of those traits? Yeshua again comes up with an answer for you Christians. Who is it that when they have a lamp, hides it under a bushel basket? No, let your light shine so that when people see your light, they will give glory to our God in heaven. You are the only evidence that we are likely to ever see of the power of God. And to be that, you have to practice theosis. You and God have to have the same life. You have to, when I see you, there should be no difference between me seeing you and seeing the power of God moving through the world. Every step you take, everywhere you go, should become a sanctuary. All present. When I see you and your actions and the things you do, it should be as if God's presence is right here. What was one of the names given to Yeshua? Emmanuel. That literally translates into God with us. Point out to me, family, the Christians you find nowadays that you can see that are God with us. Because they have lost the path to theosis, for the processes for the technologies, the capabilities, like the $6 trillion man. They've lost what turns humans into gods. I'm not bullshitting. The evidence is right there in their own theological text. You read the old church fathers, right? Irenaeus, Origen, and so on and so forth. Athanasius. You look at the practices of the desert fathers. You know, these Aramaic monks who went out into the desert and fasted like Yeshua, who lived like Yeshua, who refused to be tempted, who fought their devils and won. These athletes of God, whose very presence brought a power to the people, so much so that they elevated them in death to the level of saints, the great cloud and horde of witnesses and watchers over the people. They lived in this life and walked the path of Christ and died in Christ and became in union with Christ. And thus they're not gone. You can't even talk about sainthood today, not without it being a shell game, not without somebody trying to hype theyself up or put on airs about their own holiness or their own spirituality. Yeshua constantly rebuked these people. He said, don't be like the hypocrites who make these public displays of piety, but on the inside are like whitewashed tombs filled with all things unclean. Y'all claim to love this book, to love the Bible, to love the church, but you didn't cleave fast to the teachings that turn human beings into bearers of Christ, to the whole world's undying and eternal sorrow. You were supposed to be the ones to preach the evangelion, the good news that death and hell have no more fucking meaning. Christ is risen, the good news. And through the practices of theosis, of gaining union with God's power, you were supposed to make this whole world something we can't even fucking recognize. But now y'all quibble over doctrine. You step over people who need you. Look, you live in an environment right now that could use a whole hell of a lot of this God that you claim you love so much. Yet you're not willing to put in the work to be a spiritual athlete for God, to run your motherfucking race and to work out with fear and trembling your salvation, to be the mirror that reflects the light of God so that everybody sees it and gives glory and praise. You won't do it. But you got the nerve to tell me that God is great, so powerful, blah, blah, blah. How? How do I know that? Can't see God, but I can see your ass. And you ain't showing me nothing but filth and uncleanliness. You showing me that you just as much children of the devil as anything else. You commit what James decried. James said, if you see a brother who's hungry and you say peace to you, that you're foul. You say that you have faith. James said, I will show you my faith by what I do. Because faith without doing something is useless. It's right there in those scriptures you love to smack people to fuck around with. Where's all the new saints that the Christian church is supposed to be minting today? These people filled with theosis, These light bearers, these bringers of God's power and light into a dark universe of chaos, uncertainty, of suffering. Where are they? They could be there. They have the tools. They have the technology. They can rebuild them. But where's the commitment to do it? I see it in only one place in Christendom, and that's in the Orthodox Church. They still practice techniques designed to bring about theosis. They still teach theosis as an actual teaching of the Christian church. They teach that in conjunction, in union, in congregation, being filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, right? Or the Pneuma, the Holy Spirit, that Christians can come together on understandings of doctrine, and that there should need to be no division because God is not the sower of confusion. You go to any church other than the Orthodox churches these days, and you find it's nothing but a den of confusion. Everybody wanting to be a bishop, everybody wanting to be a prophet or a prophetess, everybody wanting to claim a title, but nobody wanting to put in the work. Nobody wanting to put in the work to gain union with Christ, with God. And that's facts. But Muslims, don't think you escape. No, not at all. Muslims, I'll be honest with you. You disappoint me. You really do. You had a unique opportunity to become one of the greatest forces of godly power on the planet Earth. I'm saying that. Islam had the power to become one of the greatest religious and spiritual forces on the planet Earth, and threw it all away. Squandered the whole fucking thing. That's right. Squandered the whole damn thing. Because you see, family, in the early days of Islam, there was power there too. Every new revelation, every new opportunity for examination of the human experience brings the potential for a new opportunity for us to use this technology of making men into gods anew again. And say what you will about Muhammad, but he definitely brought that. He brought an opportunity for you to embrace your humanness and everything that you are. And through the union of God's energies with yours, to the point where no one can make a differentiation between your actions and the will of God, could have changed the whole fucking planet of the Earth. The whole planet. And you squandered it all away. And it didn't even take long after the death of the prophet for you to start squandering the shit. You started off with sectarianism, the Khawarij, and the constitution of what would ultimately be known as the Shia, the partisans of Ali. You couldn't even make it out of the gate of the death of the prophet without fuckery being introduced into this shit. And even still, there was power. It wasn't in the hands of your so-called caliphs and leaders. No, it was in the hands of quiet mu'mineen, the faithful, the believers who cleaved to the Quran, who practiced spiritual disciplines designed to bring them closer every day to God. who moved among the people with power that was undeniable. You can still see reflections of it today in the Muslim world among the Tasawwuf, the Sufi who practice constant remembrance, zikr of God. And who then go out into the communities and become saints. They become pillars of fire that people are drawn to like moths to a flame. Ain't nobody ever seen Allah. But they seen their local Sufi saint who reaches out and touches them and heals their wounds, who ensures that they get fed, and who lifts them up constantly, not in a spirit of judgment, but in a spirit of growth, of harmony, of peace, of salam, of peace. You took a faith that had the chance to be the arbiter, the decider of peace for every human being on the planet Earth, and you turned it into the greatest cause of war. So much so, in fact, that people nowadays can't even say Islam without thinking war, jihad. But the Quran, while it talks about the need for jihad or struggle, also talks about a greater jihad, jihad an-nafs, the war or the struggle against the self. How many of you are still hearing that in your khutbahs in the masjid, huh? The constant need to fight against the admixture of both angel and devil that is the birthright of every human fucking being. Where are your practices that bring people constantly closer and closer and closer to God himself? So much so that at some point, we as little feeble-minded, hairless, big-brain, bipedal apes can't tell the difference. You had it, and you lost it. And not only did you lose it, you squandered it in sectarian violence. The Sunnis say that the Shia are on some bullshit, and the Shia say that the Sunni are on some bullshit. And then even amongst the Sunni, you got all these different madhabs. You got the Shafi, and you got the Maliki, and the Hanbali, and so on and so forth. And then when you go to the Shia side of the house, you got the Jafari school, and you got so fucking what? You gave up life and light for legalism and dogma. And you ought to be ashamed of yourself. At one time, science, mathematics, engineering, medicine, all of the great tools of civilization, the greatest inheritances of humanity was the Muslims. It was in the hands of the Muslims. Algebra, you know that shit you hated in high school, developed by Muslims. It was called algebra, right? The study of variables, the inclusion of variables to solve equations, that was developed by Muslims. Astronomy was furthered like no other under Muslims. The science of optics and the study of light was furthered by Muslims. Medicine, furthered by Muslims. Scholarship, furthered by Muslims. They even had an opportunity to fix the fuckery that had been on with the Mu'tazila school. The school that said, yes, Allah is, but we also have reason. We have the capability to use our reason, aql, to figure out the world and to interpret what the will of Allah is. And they fucked that up too. So while you bash on Christians, all you Muslim brothers and sisters out there, you ain't doing much better. You ain't. Where's the newly minted saints among you? Where are the God bearers among you? They're hidden away in small villages somewhere, practicing old arcane religious teachings and practices and technology designed to do one thing, to take men and to turn them into gods. You can't even say that concept without being a motherfucking mushrikeen. You would call any Muslim who believed that man could start to union with Allah himself, you would call him a motherfucking hypocrite. That's how far gone down the rabbit hole you are. Somebody's got to be a defender of the faith. Why not me? You know, the black sheep, the outsider, the one that doesn't fit with any of your faiths, any of your religious practices or spiritual techniques. Because I don't belong to you, I can use all of them for not just my betterment, but for the betterment of everybody around me. Every spiritual or religious system that you can come up with, family, no matter what, when you break it down, when you sift through all the dross, all the scale, all the crap, all the accretions of years of partisanship and sectarianism and dogmatic adherence to misunderstood teaching and doctrine, once you get past all of that, every effective religion, spiritual practice, faith practice that works has as its ultimate goal union of humanity with the divine. All of them. Don't believe me? Challenge me. Pick a motherfucking faith. Every single one of them. Every single one of them is about the embodiment, the invoking of deity into human beings. That, my friends, is the true power given to us by our evolutionary heritage and by reasoned, measured understanding of the birth of spiritual practice and religious practice and faith practice, and extrapolating that to today. That's a fact. So when Sister Remy walks into Muhammad's mosque and she sees these brothers and sisters who have done the spiritual work, who fight their demons on the regular, who sharpen up their minds with knowledge, the supreme wisdom, where they start to understand more about the universe in which they exist, things like the circumference of the earth and the distance between the earth and the sun, you know, things that we all should be learning. And through the practice of theosis, through the revelation that just like God came to them as a man in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, whether you believe that or not is immaterial. The fact that God came to them as a man shows that they can go to be like God. And that gives them power. Just like Yeshua came to the Christians as a man, it shows that there's a path from manhood to godhood. So I've had enough of people pretending they have the answers, who throw out little pithy quotes and shit some theologian who's got his head up his ass had to say on this, that, and the third. Damn all that. Is your faith making people into gods, making them godlike, bringing them to union with the divine, turning everything they touch, everywhere they go, everything they can perceive or not perceive into something that is sanctified, a set apart holy thing. Your faith ain't doing that. What the fuck are you in it for? I'm just keeping it a buck. Because from the outside looking in, you look real unfamiliar. Your faith creates no saints, no mirrors that reflect the goodness of this divinity you come and bash us over the head with constantly. Your faith is a facade. It's a fashion show. It's designed to have you with some place to go on Sundays. Nothing more, nothing less. Someplace to go on Fridays or Saturdays. I, as your brother and one who loves you, want to always give you the truth as I best understand it. And I can tell you, family, that you may not hear it anywhere else. You may not hear it discussed by anybody else. But I'm telling you, the purpose of your religious and spiritual and faith systems are designed to take you from being humans to being reflections of divinity. Elevating you. And elevating all of us because we're connected with you. Turning the very presence in which you sit into something sanctified. If it's not doing that, I don't know what to tell you. And since I see my numbers dropping, I think that's a good goddamn time to end this one. Family, thank you for listening to your brother. Hopefully, I gave you something that helps, something that edifies. There's links in the description field to provide a tip if you want to tip me for doing something really good with this Sucka-Free Saturday. There's also links to the new ADOS merchandise. I mean, not ADOS merchandise, the Black Sheep merchandise. I got rid of all my ADOS merchandise, right? So all I got is Black Sheep merchandise. But you can order your shirt, a hoodie, a mug, so on and so forth, all of which goes to support my work. I also have available links to books via Amazon. Purchased, through those links helps to support my channel. And I just wanted to be the motherfucker to create a discussion. I'm certain that many of you have often wondered, where the hell is the power in this shit? Everybody say I'm supposed to be powerful. I'm supposed to feel some sort of way and so on and so forth. Where is it? I'm telling you, it ain't there because they neglected the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter is that there are mental disciplines that human beings have long practiced that go to making human beings mirrors, reflections of divinity, the only evidence of divinity we're ever going to see. So if your particular practice isn't doing that, if the work you claim to be doing in your walk with Jesus ain't making you into a reflection of Jesus himself so much that when we see you, it's like seeing him, then you ain't doing it right. Just my 2 cents. So family, until next time, as always, I want to wish you all love, peace, prosperity, and power. Real power to our people.